Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughn Manor. Now, today is my Epic Comics Wednesday, and I'll be talking about a Marvel Epic collection. Steve Donoghue's channel and mine, we're doing our world's finest team up, where we each will be talking about a specific Epic collection. This week, the Epic collection that we're talking about is The Incredible Hulk. The Hulk Must Die. And this epic collection is the second Hulk epic collection, and it runs from 1964 to 1967, and it is his Tales to Astonish run when Hulk showed up in Tales to Astonish, which eventually became the Hulk magazine. So interesting stuff in here, and there's a reason I want to talk about this one. I want to talk about this. I want to talk a little bit about the character of the Hulk himself. Now, the first Marvel Epic collection, the one that came before this, has the first 6 issues of the Hulk comic book, the comic book that was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Hulk, in his original comic book, lasted 6 issues. There he is. There's the Hulk himself. He lasted 6 issues in his own comic, but I guess it wasn't financially successful enough to keep going after those 6 issues, so the comic book was canceled. But Stan Lee really liked the Hulk, so the Hulk kept showing up in all these other people's books. He showed up in the Fantastic Four, he showed up randomly in Spider-Man and some other books, and eventually he became a founding member of the Avengers, although that relationship wasn't all that successful. But all those initial adventures you could find in this first volume, this first epic collection. So if you're interested, they're in here. Excuse the snoring dogs. My dogs like to come in here and snore like every time I make a video now. So I'm going to be talking about this one. This is the second Marvel Epic collection. Now, after the Hulk was running around in other people's books making guest appearances, he finally was regarded as popular enough to get his own features. So he had a 10-page feature in Tales to Astonish. And this one has Tales to Astonish 60 through 96, all the Hulk's adventures from there. And it's in this run that the Hulk becomes the Hulk that we know. Now, the Hulk that we are familiar with is kind of the Hulk smash Hulk, you know, the big stupid guy who is stronger than anybody, and that's the Hulk that we know. But the Hulk was not exactly that way when he first showed up in the comic books, and it took him a long time to become the Hulk we know. It took him years. He is the most extreme example of the thing that Stan Lee sometimes did or had a hard time with, was that it took Stan Lee a long time sometimes to figure out the character that he was writing. It took him a long time on certain characters. Some characters didn't take him too long. He had the Fantastic Four figured out in about 3 issues. You know, Doctor Strange took about 4 separate adventures to become Doctor Strange that we are familiar with. Spider-Man was Spider-Man right away, but some characters it took him a long time to really pin down. The Hulk is the most extreme example of that, because the Hulk that shows up in the first issue of the original comic book, The Hulk, is not the Hulk that we are familiar with. He was a lot smarter, for one thing. The Hulk wasn't the Hulk smash Hulk. He was not the brightest guy in the world. He was kind of a big, rough guy, but he wasn't stupid. He was just a big, strong, rough guy. He was kind of a jerk, actually. He wasn't the most likable character of the Hulk. And I remember thinking that when I first started reading the older issues or the older stories of the Hulk, that, you know, some of these stories are okay. They're pretty good comic book stories, but I don't like the Hulk. He's a jerk. He was, I think. He was just a big, rough jerk. There wasn't a lot to like about the Hulk for me in those original Hulk adventures. But some of the stories were pretty good. Pretty good comic book stories that just, you know, starred a jerk. And Bruce Banner as a protagonist is kind of boring. He was never my favorite Bruce Banner. I never really warmed up to Bruce Banner at least in these older comic books. Kind of a wet blanket, this guy. Kind of dull. Uh, that's just how I felt about him. It was always a relief when he became the Hulk. Now I know you feel bad about Banner because, he becomes the Hulk and causes a bunch of trouble and rampages all around. So yeah, you got to feel bad for Banner, I guess, but he just was boring, Bruce Banner. It took a while for this series to really warm up, and that's what you get in this Marvel Epic Collection. It takes a long time, going from the beginning, his first solo adventure in Tales to Astonish, to the end of this book, where he pretty much is the character that we know and love, or at least some of us do, the Hulk, the big dumb Hulk. It took a long time, and there's a reason why the big dumb Hulk became popular. Is because the big dumb Hulk you could sympathize with. He was this kind of lonely creature who was in this world that was not made for him. Always hunted and feared. He just wanted some peace. But he never got it because he's stuck on this planet with puny humans who are always attacking him. And so the Hulk always got our sympathy. He was a sympathetic character. He was not when he first showed up. It took him a long time to get there. He had to really dumb down to get there. But eventually he became a character that we could sympathize and care about. We never did, or I never did, when he first showed up. It took a while. It took all these pages to get there, basically. But there's a lot of good stuff in this book, mostly having to do with the art. Just like I talked about in Daredevil, there's a lot of artistic progression that goes on in this book. Now, in the beginning of the book, the Hulk is illustrated by Steve Ditko, famous for Spider-Man. Now, unfortunately, with Steve Ditko, a lot of the comic books that Steve Ditko did outside of Spider-Man, when he was inked by other people, it didn't always turn out well. Every inker that does Steve Ditko makes his art look a little different. For some reason, I get the feeling that Steve Ditko was just kind of hard to ink, because it always turns out not nearly as good as it should. Because Steve Ditko was good, but the inking work just never works, particularly in this series. So Steve Ditko did a number of these earlier issues, but it just doesn't work for me. It's okay. It's okay work, but it's not great. Afterwards, Steve Ditko leaves the book and Jack Kirby returns. Again, Mickey Dimeo does some of the inking, which is okay. And then, who else do we get? Is this more Mickey Dimeo? Yeah, he's all right. But there are a couple people like, it's a couple of people that ink him and he's just all right. Some of the artwork in a lot of this book is not fantastic. The character of the Hulk is still kind of smart, but he's getting progressively dumber. And that's a good thing. And when he has this adventure with this guy, the leader, it starts showing up, his clouded brain. Now, the leader was also dosed with gamma radiation the same way Banner was, but for the leader, it just makes his head turn real big, and he becomes super intelligent. So we've got the super strong Hulk, the brutish character that's become super strong, against the leader who's super smart. The Hulk wins, spoiler alert. But in that story, we start to see the dumb Hulk show up. Then he goes back to being smart. Then he goes back to being dumb again. It's like I said, Stan Lee's trying to figure things out on the Hulk. It's taken him a long time, but eventually he gets there. Artistically, up to this point, up to about halfway in this epic collection, the art is just all right. It's nothing to write home about. But then an interesting thing happens. Bill Everett, the creator of the Golden Age Submariner, is brought on board. Jack Kirby, who was working on a gazillion books at once, just doesn't have time to do everything. He doesn't have time to just do the Hulk. If he did, that would have been good, but he didn't have time. So he just did these rough layouts on the page. Basically, it shows you where the characters are and what they're doing, but the really rough layouts. And then Bill Everett had to finish up this artwork. And Bill Everett's an interesting artist. And so this is where Bill Everett shows up. The Hulk Must Die, the story that this epic collection is named after. He gives Hulk a really interesting look, really kind of detailed, more detailed than we're used to. He makes the characters look really interesting in this book, and you just have some great artistic moments. I mean, that is just pretty cool when the Hulk is trapped in this pit and he's just looking out there. There are some good moments. One of the best is right here, where there's a transition from the Hulk being happy to see. There's Rick Jones and Betty Ross. He's happy to see them, but then he becomes enraged, and you'll see the progression from happy to enraged, and that's just great. And this book, from this point, starts getting artistically really interesting. And just even the villain kind of looks interesting. Just the way the art is done. And then we have this issue where the Hulk fights Hercules. Who wouldn't want to see that? Two powerhouses fighting. And something even with the artwork starts making the Hulk seem like a more interesting character. Just really kind of dynamic work, detailed work. The fight with Hercules is pretty cool. That's the main event. He got those missiles flying around. That's pretty cool. So the artwork starts getting really interesting. That's a very Everett-looking robot right there. So Everett is on this book for a while, and he just does great work. Here's Boomerang. If you're a character in comic books, and DC had Captain Boomerang, and this is Boomerang. If you're a character in comics called Boomerang, the chances are you look ridiculous. And poor Boomerang, he just looks like an idiot. He is one of the Hulk villains. The villains are pretty hit and miss in the Hulk. But some of the artwork just starts getting really great. Boom! Yeah, it's really good from around this point on. And this is where, about halfway here, is when the Hulk series starts getting good. It took a long time, but then you start getting the moody artwork. We start seeing the Hulk like this. This is an image that we see over and over in the Hulk. We start getting iconic stuff like that. So the Hulk is getting really good. Bruce Banner is still boring. Unfortunately, Bruce Banner, for me, never really got too much more interesting than he was when he started out. Bruce Banner didn't become interesting until he got on the TV show. Until he became Bill Bixby's Robert Banner. That show was really good. That show really did a lot for the character of the Hulk. It was one of the best versions of the Hulk, was the TV show, because Bill Bixby really gave Banner a sympathetic character that I never really felt in the comics. Lou Ferrigno did a good job too. That's a heck of a show, that show. And then other artists start coming on after Everett left. Gil Kane, who came on, who was fresh off the Green Lantern. His Hulk was kind of a goofy-looking Hulk in his first adventure. But by his second adventure, things started getting great. You'll take a look at the Hulk there. That's just a great image. Gil Kane was fantastic. So you started getting this really, really high quality artwork on the Hulk. I always thought Gil Kane was great. And then this is the epic collection where his arch villain, the Abomination, shows up. Another gamma creature that the Hulk fights. And Gil Kane does all the artwork for that, and Gil Kane does an amazing job. Gil Kane is an incredible artist who's drawn everything. He's just drawn everything. This guy, Superman, Spider-Man, you name a character, he's done. He's not only done it, but he's done a good job. Now the book ends with one of my favorite artists in this book, and that would be the magnificent Marie Severin, who has a really classic comic book art style. She spent a long time at EC Comics, probably doing some of the greatest comic book stories of all time, but she was the colorist. She worked in comic book coloring for a long time, she did. But she was an incredible artist all on her own. And when you look at some of the artwork that she does for the Hulk, her Hulk isn't as huge or exaggerated as some of the other Hulk work, but it's drawn in a more kind of classic EC style. Not really an EC style, but you can see the echoes of that. You can pretty much tell her history and where she came from, comic book wise, just in some of her work, which was incredible. She did great work. She's one of my favorite Hulk artists, and she does this great fight with another one of my favorite characters, the Silver Surfer. So that closes out this book. And it's just incredible dynamic work. Marie Severin did a lot of work for Marvel. She drew Doctor Strange. She drew this. She drew some other stuff. I guess we never really saw enough of her original artwork. For me, at least, I just thought she was great. She just did great stuff. She kept on coloring though for Marvel for a long time. So she closes out this epic collection, and the artwork was fantastic by that point. The stories were pretty good, and they were getting better. It's at this point, like I said, that the Hulk starts to become the Hulk that we know. Which was a good change. But man, did it take a long time. It took years for the Hulk to become the Hulk that we know. And finally, in this book, he makes it. And by the third epic collection, we're really cooking. And the stories are pretty good from that point on. It's kind of like my favorite era of the Hulk, is what happens at the tail end of this book and what continues onward. So yeah, that was my take on The Hulk Must Die, the second Marvel epic collection of the Hulk. If you've hung in here for 18 minutes, thank you. I know I can go on. And this is a comic book video, so there's probably only a few of you watching anyway, but I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. And be sure to catch Steve Donoghue's talk about the Hulk. I don't think he's as big of a fan as the Hulk as I am, so it should be interesting to see what he has to say about the Hulk. So be sure to catch that video. Okay, guys, catch me next time here at Stately Vaughn Manor. Bye, guys.